I'm Kento Bento.
This video is made possible by Dashlane. Download Dashlane for free if you never want to lose another password again at the link in the description. Bangladesh, February 7th, 2016. The director of the Bangladesh Central Bank got off the elevator on the 9th floor and headed to the back office of the Accounts and Budgeting Department. This was the most restricted part of the building. He was there to deal with a problem, one that had been plaguing the office the last few days. You see, the printer wasn't working. This was kind of a big deal. It was causing a real disruption. The automated printer, which was hooked up to the bank's software, was supposed to work round the clock, 24/7, printing out the bank's transaction reports in real time. Due to this technical glitch, however, the printer tray remained empty. Much of the day was spent trying to fix the issue, and after a great deal of effort, there was success. They were able to restart the printer. And so the backlog of transaction reports started rolling out, one by one. Now it soon became apparent that something wasn't quite right. There were more statements than expected. When they took a closer look, they found 35 suspicious payment orders for what were ridiculously large sums of money, having supposedly been transferred from the Bangladesh bank's own account to various other accounts in other countries. Certainly, no one from their bank had authorized it, and the SWIFT security system in place was unbreachable. As the director sifted through the suspicious transfer requests, the true scale of the situation started dawning on him. The transfers totaled to almost $1 billion, an absurd amount, a significant chunk of the nation's reserves. Where were they going? Who was responsible? Panic ensued as the workers scrambled to stop the payments, but it was likely too late. The ill-timed printer malfunction from earlier had caused an unfortunate delay in their response. It seemed Bangladesh had just lost $1 billion. But how? This happened in February 2016, but what led to this moment actually started 9 months earlier. Philippines, May 2015. Over 3,000 kilometers away, a group of men entered the Jupiter Street branch of the RCBC Bank just outside Manila and opened 4 bank accounts with just $500 inside. The men then left, never to return, with their accounts left seemingly abandoned. Now, returning to Bangladesh, the country was becoming one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Their central bank sat in the financial district of the capital, Dhaka, a chaotic city with almost 20 million people. But despite all this rapid growth, it was a nation that could ill afford to lose $1 billion of taxpayers' money. Fast forward, January 2016, a month before the incident, an employee at the Bangladesh bank was checking his mail at work. Now, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He thought nothing of it. But he went home that night not realizing he had just set in motion events that would soon shock the nation's banking system, if not the world. You see, he had inadvertently clicked on an infected email, one that immediately began installing a malicious program in the central bank's computer systems. This malware would allow intruders to enter the network and gain access to the inner workings of the Bangladesh bank. Hiding in plain sight, these intruders could now spy on workers and study the bank's operational procedures. And that's what they did. It was now just a matter of time. A month later, on a Thursday, as the bank was shutting down for the weekend, which in Muslim-majority countries like Bangladesh tends to be on a Friday and Saturday instead of a Saturday and Sunday, the intruders once again entered the system. But it was for the last time, because this was what it was all leading to. Now, they were in the system, but manipulating international money transfers was a whole nother thing. SWIFT, you may have heard, is a global payment network enabling financial transactions to be sent in a secure and reliable way, using military-grade security designed to be unbreachable. Just to be clear, SWIFT does not facilitate the transfer of actual funds, but rather it sends trusted payment orders between accounts, which the banks then act on. This is the standard in international banking, and this is partly why bank hackers usually focus on stealing the login credentials of individual bank account holders rather than focusing on the banks themselves. But it wasn't the case here, not for this group. Their target was the institution. Using the bank's legitimate SWIFT credentials that they collected from the malware, they were able to take control of the SWIFT terminals, as if they were legitimate bank employees. Yes, SWIFT itself is safe and secure, but the banks using them first needed to be responsible for their individual cybersecurity on their end. If their security happened to be lacking, as in the case with many developing nations, SWIFT could actually be used against them. And that's what was happening here. 35 phony transfer requests totaling $951 million was by now being sent via SWIFT to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Okay, but why New York? Well, because the Bangladesh bank owns an account there with billions of dollars on deposit, meant for international settlements. The details of the requests sent from Bangladesh were to transfer the funds from New York to various accounts set up across Asia. I'll get to that part soon. Now, with that, they were done. In and out in just hours. The next day, Friday, New York City, one of the world's biggest financial centers. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York was busy processing Bangladesh's payment orders, or supposed payment orders. The Fed, renowned for its security, initially had no cause to stop the transfers, because SWIFT instructions are legitimate, they're trusted. So, oblivious to the deception, they began processing the requests. Sunday morning, the Bangladesh bank employees, back from their weekend, were now trying to fix their darn printer problem. The automated printer connected to the SWIFT network hadn't been working the last days, and the usual printouts of real-time transfer confirmations were backlogged. Of course, this was the most unfortunate time for a technical glitch. Except it wasn't really a technical glitch. The hackers had indeed taken additional steps in preventing confirmation messages from revealing their theft, wiping out evidence from the SWIFT database and intentionally crashing the automated printer. This had bought them some much-needed time. Now, meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, $20 million arrived in a Pan-Asia bank account of a company called the Shalika Foundation, sent from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. This, of course, was just one of 35 transfers making its way to Asia. Right back in Bangladesh, the workers had now finally got the printer working, and they were sorting through the transfer requests. Panic quickly ensued as they realized 35 payment orders were made, totaling to almost $1 billion. They immediately tried to send a stop payment order to the New York Fed, but it was a Sunday, and there was no one there to respond. By the time New York staff would return on the Monday, it would have surely been too late. Now, little did they know they had actually caught a lucky break, because it turned out the automated system in New York had flagged 30 of the transactions for manual review. By complete luck, one of the words on the SWIFT order happened to match the name of a shipping company that had been blacklisted for evading US sanctions against Iran. Pure coincidence. This would prove devastating for the hackers, as $870 million worth of transfers were now blocked. Later, when staff took a closer look, they noticed several red flags. The unusually high number of payment instructions, the large transfers to private entities rather than banks, and the ridiculously large total. At this point, they had to seek clarification from Bangladesh, and after getting word of their stop payment order, the transfers were shut down. It was over. The gig was up. Or was it? Yes, 30 of the transactions worth $870 million would never be seen by hackers, but there were still 5 transactions left. The remaining 101 million, which the Fed's automated system failed to pick up on, and which was still a heck of a lot of money, had gotten through. Where did these 5 end up? The first transfer, Sri Lanka, $20 million, as we know, reached an account in the Pan-Asia Bank via Deutsche Bank, which was the routing bank, intended for a company called the Shalika Foundation. This was a supposed Sri Lankan non-profit. Now, an observant employee at the Pan-Asia Bank noticed something odd. $20 million was an unusually large amount for such a small NGO, not to mention for the country of Sri Lanka. This employee then sent the transaction back to Deutsche Bank for verification. So now Germany, Frankfurt, the payment order, just like in New York, was being reviewed. And just like New York, there were red flags, such as this one, spelling foundation as Fandation. These suspicions were soon reaffirmed, and ultimately it turned out, no surprise, that this Shalika Foundation was indeed a fake company. The money was then rerouted back to the Bangladesh Bank's New York account. Then there were 4. $81 million. But we won't drag this out, because these 4 were all sent not just to the same country, not just the same bank, but to the same branch. The Jupiter Street branch of the RCBC Bank just outside Manila in the Philippines. 4 accounts had laid dormant for 9 months with just $500 inside, untouched, until a sudden cash infusion of $81 million. These sudden bursts should have triggered an alert from RCBC, but for whatever reason, it slid under the radar. And indeed, the accounts were later found to be under fictitious identities. From there, the money was quickly withdrawn and laundered through casinos, where the electronic money transfers were converted to hard, untraceable cash. The Bangladesh Bank did try to stop the transfers, but timing was just not on their side. The stop order was not received by RCBC Bank on the expected Monday, because Monday was Chinese New Year, a non-working holiday in the Philippines. By now, you're probably noticing a trend here. Every step of the way, there were delays that benefited the hackers. And this was by design. A remarkably well-timed attack. On Thursday evening, they entered the system at the start of the Bangladesh weekend, when the bank is closing. On Friday, the New York Fed tries to clarify the requests with Bangladesh, but no one's there. On Sunday, Bangladesh staff return from the weekend but can't get through to New York as it's now the weekend in the US. On Monday, the Fed finally gets the orders to stop the transfers, but not the Philippines because it just so happened to be Chinese New Year there. And only on Tuesday, 5 days after the heist, did RCBC staff find out about the fraudulent transfers. But by then it was too late. Now, 2 Chinese men, Ding and Gao, were eventually found to be responsible for setting up the fake RCBC accounts in the Philippines. They turned out to be just middlemen, but they were still a crucial part of the operation, and investigators hoped questioning them would lead to the true culprits. Unfortunately, before the Bangladesh authorities were able to apprehend them, they left the country, boarding flights to Macau, a special administrative region of China, where it was then impossible to track them. And so with the remaining 4 transfers, the hackers were able to net $81 million. Not quite the original sum, but still enough by some metrics to be considered the single biggest bank heist in history. Now, despite the attackers' best efforts at removing evidence from the bank's systems, cybersecurity experts were still able to analyze the malware. What they found were similarities in the techniques and tools used between the Bangladesh bank heist and many other cyber attacks on financial institutions around the world, which means that this one particular group had very likely been responsible for a series of global attacks. This group was dubbed Lazarus. But there was more. As experts dug deeper, combing through the server logs of recent attacks, they found something even more unexpected. An IP address connecting Lazarus to a particular nation state. For a brief moment, they had failed to cover their tracks, and the logs had indicated that the attack servers they used had been accessed at least once from a North Korean IP address. There was also Korean language found embedded in the computer code. Now, it is important to note that it is possible that North Korea was framed, with the attackers leaving behind purportedly solid evidence in order to mislead investigators. But, according to the majority of cybersecurity experts, it is almost certain that North Korea was behind the attacks. And it wasn't just attacks on financial institutions. They were also revealed to be responsible for many cyber terrorism and cyber espionage campaigns against the South Korean government and various South Korean infrastructures. Then there's the Sony Pictures hack of 2014, one of the biggest corporate breaches in history. Lazarus had taken great exception to the plot of the film The Interview, where the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was targeted for assassination by the CIA. Cinemas across the US were threatened with terrorist attacks if the film wasn't pulled. North Korea of course denied any responsibility, but it seemed fairly obvious that this group was actively targeting known enemies of the state. Now, as for Lazarus's banking exploits, like the Bangladesh incident, the attacks were just the start. They had to ensure the money would then get to the intended location. And the way they did that was to have the stolen funds move through places like Macau, which in particular is known to be North Korea's financial point of contact with the outside world. We know, thanks to the 2 Chinese middlemen, that that's exactly where the Bangladesh funds ended up. And from there, it wouldn't have been hard for the money to be wired directly to Pyongyang. Proceeds would then have likely gone towards advancing their nuclear program, funding the lifestyles of the elite, and propping up their economy. All this quite possibly representing a significant percentage of the country's current GDP. If this is all accurate, and North Korea is indeed behind these attacks, the international implications would be profound, especially with the recent developments, as this would be the first known case of a nation-state robbing banks. From there, perhaps anything is possible. They could hack political campaigns, weapons systems, civilian bank accounts, or even YouTube accounts who have made content they may find unfavorable. Oh crap. Actually, that's okay, because I have Dashlane. Dashlane makes keeping track of all your passwords ridiculously easy. Not only is it going to prevent North Korea from spying on you, yeah, you, because that's likely to happen, but it'll store all your passwords in one super secure place and autofill them on websites you go to. If you have the same password everywhere, but are too lazy to go to each individual website to change your passwords, well, not a problem, because you can just click one button on the Dashlane app and it does it for you. Dashlane also has a password generator, so you don't have to spend time thinking up super strong passwords like this one. By going to dashlane.com/Kento Bento, you can get started for free. And if you want some extra special features like syncing your passwords and login details between all your devices like iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, you can upgrade for 10% off by using the promo code Kento Bento at checkout.